to inform you all more about NProject Mod and what it can bring to the community patch. So that's why we're having this meeting today. Before we begin, I'd like to inform everyone that the meeting is being recorded. This is for the benefit of other modders who wanted to watch the meeting but couldn't make it today. I also like to point out, or you guys have probably already noticed, that I'm not a good speaker. It has been years since I've had to make a presentation. So
This Bobby, don't worry.
Fine. All fine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
At the end of the meeting, I will share the link to this presentation so that other people can go through it as well. And that's about it. So, presentation outline. First, we'll start with an introduction. What is NProject Mod? What can NPM offer to the community patch? More details about how NProject Mod asset fix process works. And finally, if we have time, I would also like to express some concerns that me and N5 have had with community patch. We'll see. Anyway, let's start with introductions. So my name is the XGen, or Zeke, as I'm more well known around ModDB. And my partner for today is N5P29 or NLima29 or just N5. He is the creator of NProject Mod. The two of us are part of No Life Studios, one of the bigger modding groups for Zero Hour. Currently, we have 19 members, 18 mods, 14 of which have been released, including the NProject Mod. Other popular mods that we have made is the Shockwave Chaos mod, Operation Firestorm, Zero Hour Reborn, CNC Untitled, Condition Zero, and Project Tomahawk Storm for generals. Aside from mods that we have made, we've also acquired some mods for the sake of preservation. That includes ProGen and also Frontline Chaos. So, what is NProject Mod? NProject Mod, or NPM for short, is a mod made by N5P29. Started in 2006 and added to... Yes?
It's 2006. That's a long time. Keep going.
Yeah. It was started in 2006 and formally added to ModDB in 2008. It's an enhancement mod focusing on mainly on fixing bugs and improving the game quality. Made some roster changes and balance changes with the goal of making all the generals more well-rounded and less specialized. Fixes and changes are based on online reference, playtests, and user reports. So, back in the day, a bit before my time, there was a CNC modding forum created by Desire. In that forum, Desire made a thread named Coding Mistakes by EA, in which most, if not all, the zero-hour modders at the time would they found while modding the game. The top contributors of the thread were later considered to be the pioneers of zero-hour modding. This included Desire, Beng, Fritz, The Hunter, as some of you may know as the leader of Shockwave, Yayo01, now known as Chris, the leader of CNC Untitled, and many others. Can imagine it like something like Oppenheimer, but for 0 hour modding. Anyway, this list was the primary reference for the bug fixes in NProject Mod and other mods of the time. This and multiple references were used to determine the validity of the changes for NProject Mod. That is to say, each change has been carefully considered and viewed from multiple perspectives and not just decided randomly. So what else has NProject Mod done? Revived cut content, unused units, missing challenge maps, expanded options menu, world builder mesh mold tool, etc. Added boss general as a playable faction in skirmish, and is regarded as the top enhancement mod for 0 hour among other 0 hour modders due to the number of fixes and attention to detail. N5P29 himself is a well-respected modder who's worked on a number of different projects, including Rise of the Reds, as some of you might know. The mod is still growing even today, but due to it being worked on only by N5 for the most part, progress is slow. So, I'm not sure how many people here actually play mods or what their experience with mods are, but I'm just gonna list some examples of the unused units, like the Toxin RPG Trooper, Hypersonic Aurora, and the Scorpion APC, as you can see in this picture, the box tank thing. As for original content, in the other picture, there's the flame tank, the twin Gatling cannon, and also the siege cannon for tank general. Now, the heavy flame tank and the twin Gatling general. Twin Gatling tank is pretty self-explanatory. The siege cannon is much more interesting as it's a pseudo artillery unit added in to help tank general deal better with turret spam, particularly EMP Patriots. Unlike Inferno cannons, they are direct fire units, so they require line of sight and cannot shoot over obstacles. This was done to limit its capabilities and retain tank general's lack of proper artillery weakness, and also to keep it more in theme with tank general. So more or less, it's a long-range tank rather than an artillery. Uh, yeah. So now we move on to NPM milestones.
Can I ask a question before that?
What?
Can I ask a question before that? The long tank range, is it the same as an artillery or is it shorter?
It is somewhere in between, if I remember. Maybe N5 can clarify. So not as long range as an Inferno cannon, but longer than Battle Masters.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, wait,
Or maybe it is the same.
Five is writing something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he said around Firebase range.
Yeah,
M5 mentioned it.
it's
yeah.
around Firebase range.
Yeah, I was just asking because if we would introduce these things, for example, later in our game as well, then it would also change the entire balance system because we have an entire new kit of range, right? There's like 3 range types right now, which is like tank hunter, then small infantry, and then artillery, and they will introduce a 4th one. So
Yeah, I'm not introducing the unit to add it to the patch. This is an introduction to NProject Mod and a description of the things that they've done.
of course.
That's it. Anyway, back to NProject Mod. Fixed almost all bugs in the game, or at least all that can be fixed through modding. Restored all cut 0 hour content and polished them to fit properly with the existing gameplay, and also revamped existing faction assets, both to fix bugs and elevate them to match the quality of newer content. So if we go back briefly to the previous slide, you can see the new units and the existing units all look more naturally together. That's a important aspect we look into when we make our art assets. As for the other pictures in this slide, shown here is our overlords with upgrades, not blocking build. Not sure how many of you noticed, but if you try to build a structure on top of an overlord with upgrades, you can't, because the game counts the Gatling cannon and the other add-ons as structures. So you will have to manually move the overlords away before you can place structures. And PM has fixed
same with
this.
Avengers.
Yeah, same with Avengers. And the other picture shows the detention center with fixed factory exit bones, the Tomahawk Storm, and also the small particle cannon, the baby particle cannon. All of these are working in End Project Mod, but currently they are only available through World Builder because at the moment there's not really a good place for them in the game, as they would change balance way too much, especially the detention center and the POW system. So people who have played mods before, particularly ProGen or more recently Rise of the Reds, are familiar with the mod version of the cut POW system from the General's beta build. The system used by End Project Mod is slightly different. You upgrade your infantry with special weapons to basically turn infantry into crates. So far, it sounds familiar, but unlike in other mods, it turns the infantry. You use the POW trucks to turn the captured infantry into prisoners. Prisoners are then sent to either the detention center, the propaganda center, or the GLA prison, depending on the faction you use. It'll be better explained as we watch this video.
They will submit to our ways.
Army's elite. Arming flashbangs.
China can always use more people. What is your wish? I will go.
We must find the new homes. Ready for action.
We will not be oppressed. Use the darts to subdue them. He will be our hostage.
Unit lost.
They will submit to our ways. Where are the prisoners?
Standing attention. Knock them out.
It's a bit confusing in this first part because it's showing the prisoners being subdued and captured. It'll make sense. It'll make more sense a bit later on in the video.
White man. Hold it right there.
They will submit to our ways. Get the shackles ready.
Let's fight. Do not resist.
They will agree with us. Eventually.
We surrender.
There's always room for more.
As you can see, when the ranger was captured, he turned into a prisoner. And as you can see, that ranger just got run over because he wasn't in a surrendered state.
The Iron Order shall reign. hostage. We will take him alive. Put them to rest. We will take him alive.
Where are the fugitives? We'll be there soon. You got any more? We'll be there soon. Following procedures. You got any more?
Are these original voice lines as well?
They're from the game.
Let us leave
They're in the
my
game.
oppressor behind. Show me the way out.
Let's fight. We will not be oppressed.
Freedom is sweet.
And there, as soon as they turn into prisoners, you can exit them and select them and send them into the building.
And how much money did they give? Because I can't see too well.
I think that's like 100, but the stats for it are not final. It's more the videos for, what do you call this?
Yeah.
Demonstration
Was just
purposes.
to show, yeah.
Yeah, cool
Temporary
stuff.
stat. Okay. Other things that N Project Mod has done. Added the boss general to Skirmish, as mentioned earlier, complete with updating her arsenal to be consistent with the other zero-hour generals and giving her a working Skirmish AI. Added the missing demolition general and infantry general challenge maps. The Demogen challenge map was an unfinished map found within the game files, while the infantry general challenge map is a modified version of a map made by this guy which can be downloaded from CNC Labs. Later, there is a link to the map in my presentation notes. You guys can go over the links after I send the presentation. So yeah, for those who have played a boss general mod or have tried to add boss general themselves, you would know that some of her units acted differently compared to the same unit from other generals. This has been fixed in N Project Mod. They now all work consistently with the other generals. And also, some changes were made to her to give her a better fighting chance in skirmish because she doesn't really do well in skirmish because her tech tree is locked to the respective super weapon of the faction, which is very, very hard to do. So yeah, and project. So she was given additional tools, additional upgrades to make her more competitive in skirmish, and also working AI. That's a nice touch. So other milestones. And Project Mod started focusing on fixing civilian assets in 2018. Has fixed and improved all the civilian buildings. This includes coding fixes, texture fixes, and model fixes. Also re-enabled missing model condition states due to coding mistakes, and created brand new models and textures for those that were actually missing. So yeah, coding mistakes could be incorrect geometry settings, missing condition states or using the wrong model, using the wrong model for particular condition state, stuff like that. Texture fixes are something like what Zezon has showed before. Fixes here and there to improve consistency and quality. The bigger thing is the model fixes, because that includes fixes to stuff like shadow bleeding, fixes to smoothing errors, probably probably more important to most people here is the garrison bone issue. Uh, I'm sure some people here have experienced garrisoning a building, having with rocket soldiers having them shoot at the ground, destroying the structure that they're in. So yeah, this issue has been fixed in N Project Mod. However, I understand that changes to the bone location for certain models would create mismatches. So it will be understandable if these changes wouldn't be pushed to the first patch. As I understand, for the first release, we're going for mass adoption first, which means compatibility and preventing mismatches is more important, which is fine. We can wait. So aside from fixing all of the structures, we've also and Project Mod has also fixed all of the units, fixed all the broken code animations, including some never before seen, like the horse cart and the scooter. Fixed models that were invisible in game, unused, or just plain broken. Terrorist converted vehicles also have a new system where larger vehicles had bigger explosions, and chemical trucks left toxin. If you can see the light blue bus in the bottom right, in the original game, the entire bus was just one piece. The wheels and everything were just one piece. So when it was fixed in N Project Mod, we fixed it. The wheels are now separate, so now they turn. There's shiny windows now, consistent with other vehicle models, and also it has headlights. So yeah. Aside from units and structures, we've also fixed the trees and the shrubberies. They can now all be properly crushed and burned. They can also be destroyed by AoE weapons. Re-enabled a lot of missing invisible shrubs and bushes, which is helpful for mappers. Added unused trees and shrubs as well. Also, we've fixed, and Project Mod has fixed civilian props such as barrels, crates, lampposts, etc., as shown in this picture here. There are links to the ModDB articles describing these fixes more in detail in the slide notes. So now we're gonna go over the things that NPM plans to do in the future. So the last public release of N Project Mod was 4 years ago, September 2021. A lot more stuff has been added since then. There will be a new public release soon, both to update the now ancient public beta and to celebrate the new 1.05 update and source code release. Even after all these asset fixes, there's still more work that needs to be done, including balance tweaks and fixes to the campaign, challenge mode, etc. Even with its dedication to keep everything as vanilla as possible, demand still came for a fix-only version of NPM, without any of the new additions or cut content. However, removing all the new content would rob NPM of its identity, so the decision was made to split the project. So now we go to N Project Lite. N Project Lite inherits all the necessary fixes and improvements done in the main N Project mod. Additional content not found in the original game will not be included. Boss General will not be playable in Skirmish. All playable factions will be reverted to their vanilla 0-hour roster. In case new fixes are discovered in the main branch, this version will be updated as well. The idea of releasing a fix-only version of NProject Mod has been around since 2012. The idea came not only because of the demand for a fix-only version NPM, but also because of the hope that other modders would use it as a good clean base for their own mod, without having to re-implement all the base game fixes themselves. Pikaman asks, why isn't NProject Lite on Gen Launcher? Well, the purpose is for NProject Lite is to be a base for new mods. So it wouldn't really make sense for it to be in Gen Launcher. However, the default NProject mod is in Gen Launcher, so you can play it there. Where was I? Okay. Preparations were made to prepare for the split. There were still a few necessary fixes that needed to be made to the main NPM mod. That was when Super Patch and later the Community Patch was announced. NProject Lite shares many similar goals with the Community Patch project. So depending on how the Community Patch goes, there might not be a need for a separate NPM Lite version. So what can NPM offer to the Community Patch? As previously mentioned, all the fixed civilian assets shared so far, which includes structures, units, props, shrubs, etc. NPM has also recentered civilian structures and props with fixed collision boxes for improved pathfinding. As you can see in this picture here, a lot of the civilian assets are off-centered and their bounding boxes are also much bigger than the actual model, which makes things very confusing in-game for pathfinding and also projectiles being blocked when they shouldn't be blocked and stuff like that. Also, all of the normal zero-hour maps have been updated with the recentered version of all the fixed civilian assets moved back to their original places. So, as an example here, the Asian nightclub, after we recentered it, it got moved out of position. So, we had to go over every map and basically fix that. The recentered civilian assets were fixed by first recording their original coordinates in 0 hour before being recentered, taking note of the difference in their center point, then making an Excel sheet that would automatically calculate the corrected coordinates and even the rotation angle. Why is the rotation angle important? Because for a lot of the civilian buildings, we also made it so that the entrance is always facing forward. We did this because we thought it would be more helpful for mappers, because in the original game, it's pretty confusing. Sometimes you rotate an object and instead of the front facing, it's either the side or the back. Most, if not all, of the structures in NProject Mod have been fixed so that the entrance always faces forward. Now, I understand that these fixes may not be wanted for the first release of Community Patch because of the focus on avoiding mismatches and compatibility and preventing mismatches. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, we are willing to review all of these assets one by one, case by case, and we're willing to delay the addition of some structures when needed. So fixing the collision box of structures were simple enough, as most of them were square. The difficulty, but certain props like these rocks were different case, because if we just expanded the bounding box to cover the whole model, there would be a lot of dead spaces, which would make it difficult for mappers to place the objects in a map. Also, it would mess with pathfinding. So for End Project Mod, we just decided to fix them the best way that we can. Mostly eyeballing it and seeing what works, what would work the best. It's not the best solution, and perhaps if we can have geometry settings like in Battle for Middle Earth or later CNC games where you can define multiple geometry objects, maybe we can fix this properly, but for now, this is the best we could do. So aside from fixed civilian assets, of course, there are also fixed faction assets. These include model improvements, texture improvements, and even fixed cameos. As seen here in this picture, the Chinook model has been updated so that it's slightly more rounded and less boxy. But overall, it still keeps the same look. And meanwhile, for the fixed cameos, a lot of them are now using their actual in-game model instead of random Google image search images. And also, a lot of them are now showing their proper team color. Particularly the GLA ones, as a lot of the GLA ones had white team color. Also, the China airfield now shows the helipad, which wasn't there in the original because in Vanilla Generals, the Chinese airfield didn't have a helipad. That cameo was never updated for 0 Hour. Also, the visible yellow parking bones have been removed. The USA Barracks actually shows the USA Barracks instead of the USA Command Center. I'm not sure how many of you actually noticed that. Many other fixes. The minigunner is now holding a minigun instead of an Uzi. Yeah. Aside from we also tried to update the model's visuals a bit. Now this goes more into change category, but I feel like it's an acceptable change because it's an update to make it look closer to its concept art as shown here. We've added additional protection for the missile and also slight updates to the UV maps and stuff. Here we have an updated Emperor Overlord model. In the original, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but the front of the turret has tread textures on it. I'm not sure if this was a mistake or some kind of reference to World War II. I know some images of World War II tanks had tank treads bolted onto the side for extra armor, quotation marks. But anyway, in End Project Mod, we fixed it. Also, if you notice in the render here, in the credits section, you see the hunter's name there. So I point this out to show that modders do in fact collaborate with each other and work together, as opposed to what some people might say. It's just that collaboration happens only under the right condition. So aside from that fixed front turret part, Additional fixes have been done to the armor, side armor skirts, and also improvements to the rest of the turret texture. But again, overall, the unit still looks more or less the same. Here we have an updated minigunner model. It now only has one bayonet instead of an entire column of bayonets. Does the minigunner need a bayonet? That's debatable, but it's there. Also, the gun has been updated with elements taken from the Gatling tank and the Gatling cannon, because the minigunner is essentially a Gatling weapon but infantry. But the majority of the model is still the same. Here we have an updated Comanche. As you can see here in the right picture, before you get the rocket pods upgrade, the Comanche only has empty wing stub. Funnily enough though, the missiles of the Comanche don't come from those empty stubs, but from the center of the model, because it never actually had any proper bones for the missiles. In End Project Mod, not only was the main body modified to make it slightly rounder like the Chinook, but they've also added missiles that are there even without the rocket pods upgrade. And
If I may say something, if I understand correctly, the image on the right is the original Comanche, right?
yes,
Okay, go ahead.
yes. So yeah, the missiles now come from the actual visible missiles in the End Project Mod model, and also the missiles properly disappear after being fired, just like the Tomahawk. So that also doubles as a good visual aid for players, I suppose, in addition to the visible ammo pips. Aside from updates to the models and stuff, there are also a lot of fixes and changes vetted by other modders, player feedback, other enhancement projects, and their own testing for over several years. So, a lot of mods make the same changes because all of these issues exist within the base game. So, End Project Mod has made all of these necessary fixes, as mentioned earlier, because one of its goals is to be a good base for other modders to make their to build their mods on top of. As shown in these pictures, you have the Scud Storm showing the proper color of Anthrax based on what the player has, and also the different USA power plants. The default US power plant, the Super Weapon General power plant with advanced control rods, and the Laser General's advanced cold fusion reactors with the purple rod. A lot of mods have these changes and have made these changes. So people who play a lot of mods have seen these changes made time and time again. Yeah. I decided to show them here for the people who maybe they don't play mod. This is the type of necessary fixes that you see in Project Mod. Another fix that's more of a change. An example of a more substantial change, if you will, In NPM, the Scud Storm missiles are hidden until they are ready to launch. There were two main considerations for this. One, it was difficult to tell which Scud Storm was ready to launch, whereas you can easily tell with the other super weapons. And two, the Scud Storm reload animations are really cool. And we believe that it's a crime that not many people know they exist because it's very hard to catch them. So we also have a video for this.
We can now use our Scuds. Where shall we start? Launching Scuds.
Now, these animations exist in the default game, but they're only really shown while the Scud is reloading, which only lasts for a few seconds because you're usually looking somewhere else in the map while the Scud Storm is firing. But yeah, it's a very nice animation, and that's why we decided on this change. So what else can End Project Mod offer to the community patch? A pool of revived and polished cut content ready to be added to the game. As good as fixes and improvements are, they won't be enough to attract players because most players want new stuff. This is why the zero-hour modding community has existed for so long. Of course, many zero-hour players are averse to change because more units mean more balance changes, meaning more things to consider, meta shifts, and all that stuff. However, it seems that most of them are okay with just at least reviving cut content. And if not, well, one option is to have a switch, much like how in Red Alert 2, where you can switch. There's a switch for short game, MCV repacks, random crates. Now that the source code has been released, maybe we can have a switch for cut content, or maybe just have a separate add-on for it or something. But it is something to consider because I see a potential marketing opportunity for it to kind of get people who are not really into modding, I guess, or at least get them to be more accepting of new stuff. So, pictured here is one of the more famous cut units, the Heavy Toxin Tractor. It's based on an early concept art for the Toxin Tractor, as you can see here on the left. And it actually has a model and texture that exists in the General's Alpha build. The End Project Mod version has been heavily modified to look more like the default Toxin Tractor. But yeah. Now, I know this is an End Project Mod presentation, but I feel like certain people will get mad at me if I don't at least mention that other mods have also done the same thing, namely Shockwave, whose model is admittedly closer to the one from the original concept, and also Operation Firestorm as shown here. Many other mods have done this. You might have seen the pictures of this type of arrangement around, roughly. But yeah, to keep things related to the topic at hand, End Project Mod, or rather us in No Life Studios, have a lot of connections with other popular mods like Shockwave. So another thing we can offer to the community patch is to become a bridge to those mods and help request assets, manpower, or other things that are needed. Here's another famous cut unit, the Iron Dragon. which not only has a model and texture in the alpha build, but even an entire mission based around it, complete with cinematics. Unfortunately, the cinematics are very bad and are basically unusable. But it's still interesting. Uh, some of you people who play mods might know of the Iron Dragon, but not necessarily this black version of the Iron Dragon. Most of you probably know the white Iron Dragon used in Shockwave and other mods. The End Project mod, it looks fairly different from the original, but it's somewhere in between the original module and texture and something that you would find in the released version of 0 Hour. So that's another cut unit that can be added either through Switch or by a separate add-on. And last, we have the China Agent, a cut unit that's not as well known. It does have models and animations in the base game, but barely any mod has added this unit, if I remember correctly. Presumably, it was a cut and later replaced by the Saboteur for the GLA, which has a similar role. Actually, let's watch this video first. So it uses Saboteur voices lines. Here it's showing off the bribe ability.
I will keep this charge safe.
I would pay you to add this unit.
Their security is false.
Its second ability is something that you might be more familiar with, or at least you've seen used by the Saboteur, but unlike the Saboteur, the agent isn't consumed.
This way is good.
Can continue to go on and
They will suspect
cause more havoc. Here's another example of the bribe ability.
I will keep this charge safe. That was a fun ride, huh?
So, unfortunately, since it uses basically hijacking things, there are a lot of hard-coded sounds that can't be
Their
removed.
security is false.
And here it uses its final ability, which is a melee attack.
I'll shut them down.
Yeah, that's it.
Kicks them to death. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, yeah. Now that the source code have been released and maybe we can go about polishing this unit further. Another thing to point out is that in End Project Mod, we replaced the Saboteur animations to use the agent animations instead. The worker animation. So in End Project Mod, it uses the agent animations, which looks a lot better. And what that also means is that the Saboteurs in End Project Mod can be modified to also use the agent abilities that you see here. So that's more possibilities in the future. Okay. I'll take a break here to answer questions.
I have one question about the Scud Storm. I'm sure you know about the Scud Storm in regular Command & Conquer Generals. When it's ready to fire, the missiles already point up. Just curious why you didn't go for that and instead went for like the reloading animation.
Because of the because we really wanted to show people the reload animation, we think
All right.
it's
Okay.
better. Although that was another option, but we felt like this was a lot cooler.
All right. Yeah. No. Fair enough.
I think I might have an explanation for it. If you've noticed that when the missiles point up on the Scud Storm, you see some kind of toxin or something is sprayed or being spilled out of them. I think it's kind of annoying to have that constantly playing before you launch the Scud Storm.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I was
Ah.
just curious. That's all. I also think, yeah, cut content could theoretically, like you're saying, with a checkbox or something, could just be added in as well. But of course, yeah, like if that happens, we'll need to look into balancing and all those things when we get to that. Because this agent actually looks pretty powerful. So when it does the bribing thing, does it remain stealth while it does it?
Yes, it
Yikes.
remains
Yeah, that's
stealth
pretty
while
easy.
using all of its abilities.
So it's a hijacker. You can actually, it's a multi-use hijacker, multi-use saboteur, essentially.
Yes.
The
And it
thing
can
I
kick
could
That can also knife.
the thing I could see, I think what we can do now that we have the source code is that we could make abilities that cost money. Because if you, I'm pretty sure all of you have played Red Alert 3. There's a similar ability in Red Alert 3 that the agent has and the
Aye.
allies. Yeah. So the bribe ability does cost money in Red Alert 3. And if you don't have the money to pay for that ability, you can't use it. Now that we have the source code, I believe that we can make paid abilities possible. Like probably some kind of special munition fire from a weapon that, it's kind of a rare or some kind of a special ability. And a bribe ability would be one of those things that would make sense to have
Well, I
in the
guess it can
game if
already
it
be
costs
added.
money.
If you look at the USA units, they have like a drone. You could theoretically give him money, and then he has the money to give the bribe. You know what I mean? Something like that.
No, the thing
Yeah.
about that, that's an upgrade. Upgrades are not reversible.
Yeah, but what if you make
Well,
revertible
why won't-
upgrades?
Yeah.
Yeah, but why wouldn't
think
it
that
be
would
reversible? If a drone dies, then you can get a new drone. So you could even have it be something attached to the unit that
but I
then
think that-
disappears after the bribe gets.
I think that's also a
but
really nice mechanism to balance it, right? Because it costs you the money to basically buy the bribe money on the unit, and if the unit dies before he actually executes the bribe, well, then you're out the money. So there's also a risk involved, right?
Yep.
Yeah. As N5
Well, that's cool.
has said in the chat, it's important to clarify that because this unit is absurdly powerful, currently it's only available through World Builder, along with the Tomahawk Storm, ICBM, and other stuff.
So these are just proof of concepts or demonstrations for capabilities you guys came up with. These aren't actual like content or you want to put into the game. Yeah, you should clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are very cool
Yeah, but
things
still.
you can add and do. They're very unique.
I think ultimately, when it comes to the player base, we often think of multiplayer because most of us are, multiplayer oriented. But the vast majority of players just play offline, casual things. They like missions. They like, having extra units to toy with and play with and things like that. So it could be fun to introduce a mechanic to add these guys back in if the players choose to enable it, even if it is overpowered to an extent.
I mean, the other thing we can maybe do is basically add units that are only available in skirmish. I mean, that's kind of how what's it called, the Red Alert 3 expansion works. It doesn't have any multiplayer because some of the units are broken and they knew it.
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I think if you are playing with a friend together, you should have the freedom to enable it if you're playing against AI or even if you play against each other.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
both
You
are
could
happy
just
with
run
it, why
arcade
not?
mode then. Yeah, the tick for arcade mode then, Just enable arcade mode or competitive mode in some button. That'll be fine.
I mean, after all, the players have to click accept and accept the game conditions before they start the game. If they don't agree that they don't want to play with the arcade mode, as Bruce mentioned, then they just don't play. But if they're two friends and they just want to have fun, yeah, that makes sense to have some kind of button that enables these units.
Or I remember somebody mentioning that Stealth General had a quad sniper upgrade, and that upgrade is inaccessible to the players. It's only in the campaigns on hard mode, and this upgrade allowed quads to one hit any infantry, like a sniper rifle. And having that multiplayer is a bad idea, but we should let the players, have such tools or, leisure if they want to do it. That's up to them.
Yeah. I feel
So
like
what would-
a switch that you can just toggle on and off would be the simplest thing.
Mhm.
And just have players agree.
Also,
That's where
regarding what you said
communication's
about
great.
regarding the art assets and stuff, that's all like very good work as well, and they're all valid points. Yeah, ideally the civilian buildings have correct collision boxes and things like that. But yeah, basically what you said, at this stage we can't really do much with that because the first community patch can't touch it because it'll cause a mismatch.
On the structures, I have a question. So the goal of the recentering is to correct the collision boxes, the centering of this. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yes, and that's the only reason, or are there other concerns?
That's about the only reason.
Mhm.
Aside from OCD.
Well, that makes sense. So the concern I have, you showed that you had to go through the maps and you had to then recenter them in the maps to accommodate the new center position in the model. Like this works for official maps that are bundled with our works, but this doesn't work for other custom maps. So like the ranked maps and all.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that we are open to releasing the tool that we use to recenter the objects to any mapper who might want it. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah. So on that note, I wonder if the better strategy here is to go with a code solution where we say we don't recenter the structures, but we allow to place a new pivot point onto a model where we define center
that's
position.
another thing. That's another solution because as I remember, Battle for Middle Earth, I'm not sure if 1 or 2 allows this.
Mm-hmm.
You can change the center through code only.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I
another
think
option.
that would be a good option because then we don't need to mess with any maps. We just put the center position and then the model can stay where it is, and we would only fix offsets between models. Like if a damaged state would be offset from the pristine state for some reason, right? That probably happens here and there.
Yeah.
Right.
Ideally, we'd just add this feature directly into World Builder, right?
Well, you need to tell. Yeah, I guess you could also have like an ini configuration where you say, okay, the box is offset by this much from the center position. That could also be a solution. Yeah. Like for example, this is done with other kinds of things, like where you spawn like a particle, like where's the offset, or where you spawn, like when you have an OCL, you can say, okay, what is the offset? Where should the object spawn? Right.
Yeah. So we can talk more about this when we get there. But yeah, there are multiple options to try. Okay, I'm just
I will
gonna
say
check
that's
the
kind of disheartening if all those model changes were just put to the side. I mean, if the code solution is faster and cleaner, then sure, but it kind of sucks because that's a lot of effort put in.
I think, as Zeke mentioned during the presentation, the model fixes doesn't just involve the collision fixes. It's also has other fixes for the shaders, for the smoothing groups, for the shadow bleeds. It's not only the collisions that are the concern here.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
biggest problem
but
is like if you take the models that they completed and you just slot them into the current game, it will cause mismatches, right? So there needs to be some sort of waiting period. And the other concern I
yeah,
have is since they rotated some of the buildings, right? If you're going to put them one-on-one into the assets that that the base game has, all the existing maps, their buildings will be rotated as well, right? So that's the other thing. It will break existing maps. So we have to think about that.
for the normal 0-hour maps, we've already fixed those. But yeah, it will
I have a
be
question.
a pain for custom maps, that's for sure. But yeah, at the very least, for this fix to be even feasible, basically almost everyone who owns 0-hour would need to be playing on the patch. Then it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But yeah,
Okay,
it's a
I have
matter
a
of
question.
getting to that point first.
Which is why the code solution is sort of nice, right? Because if you don't specify like the rotation change, then it might be possible just to keep the old rotation. And if you any newly placed buildings will follow the new rotations, and that will be stored in some ini file, right? That might be cool if it's possible.
So
Yeah.
for my question, I want to ask: you guys mentioned that you did these on official maps, and it's not just the relocation of the assets. Like it's not just the angles and how it's rotated. It's also like bleeding and shadows and all those technical things. Wouldn't it be better if you created like, I don't know, house is the basic house that we have from 0-hour, and you can do house B or like house variant 2, and for the future you could have the official maps, and the official maps use the the updated stuff, and for the unofficial maps, they could still use the base, the library for the old things would still be there, but moving on in the future you would use the the better assets. So this way you can have cross compatibility with both of them.
I like the idea, but I think it's a little bit of then double maintenance, right? Because then
It
you have
is.
to maintain both of them instead of maintaining one that has like a parameter that you just change for the new stuff.
If there
So
weren't
it's
like shadows and other bleed and other stuff added to the new models, then I'll be completely with the code. But if these things are just cleaned up, improved, and optimized, then we shouldn't disregard them. They seem very valuable.
Yeah. Seems like Camo is trying to say something, or maybe his mic is just.
No, I'm not. Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my mic was on.
Okay. Andy seems to be typing something.
For a later patch, I think it would be worth adding all the building fixes from MPN, because from a modeler perspective, it does make a lot of difference when you have the difference between a fixed model and a model with wrong smoothing groups and not welded geometry is day and night, basically. I can demonstrate it in 3ds Max if necessary, so you can actually understand the kind of fixes that N5 has implemented in project.
So there is a question here by Pika Man. A lot of the end project mod units are cool. I wonder if there's a way to make a system like Company of Heroes where you can choose which units you bring. Some units have strength and drawbacks, etc. I guess that would depend on the source code, guys. It would be nice if you could create your own general, although I'm not sure how hard that could be. But yeah, could be interesting. I know what you're talking about. Like, I played Company of Heroes 1 before, and you could pick, for example, which light tank to bring. So even if you're both the same faction, you would have different units.
Oh yeah, the DLC. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're thinking of Company of Heroes 2. In one, they had like you could either bring a troop carrier that is higher armored but slower, or a more faster, nimble one but dies easier.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, basically like
Yeah.
the M10 and the Hellcat.
Yeah.
Hellcat is faster, but can be camouflaged.
Yeah, that would be a major change to the game for sure. And it would depend on how determined people are to code that in, I suppose. But it would be cool. Andy says, with the source code, we should have more insight on both model and map format. So perhaps a tool script to apply those transformations is possible. Yeah. Anyway, if there are no more questions, there are still more to this presentation. Yeah, so I'll just continue for now. Yeah, now we're gonna go more in depth of the End Project Mod asset fix process. So the basic process is as follows. N5 posts about a new issue on Discord. We discuss the issue on Discord. Then N5 tests possible fixes based on our comments and feedback, what other mods have done, and his own judgment. Once the optimal fix has been decided, there is a period of in-game testing, going through all the possible relevant cases. Once N5 and everyone else is satisfied with the fix is cleaned up, logged, and then we move on to the next issue. So yeah, models and textures are imported into 3ds Max and checked all around. Models and textures are checked together to prevent tunnel vision and making unnecessary fixes. Fixed assets are also tested in-game to make sure changes are consistent and don't stick out in a bad way when compared to other existing assets. So for the most part, we only check the parts of the model that are actually visible. Sometimes when you view textures by itself, you see some obvious errors, but if you actually import the model and apply the texture, you'll see that the part with the error is not even used in the model. So for us, it's important to test both of them at the same time just to make sure that you're not wasting resources. Sometimes you learn that certain textures aren't even used at all by any model. Even models that it's supposedly attached to based on the name. So I think Zezon briefly talked about this before. There are some EN textures that are not used at all. They could be from a cut feature or something that was taken out from the final game. We're not sure yet, but at the moment they are being ignored because they are not used anywhere. So now I'm gonna go through a few case studies just to show kind of the process in action. So one of my favorite fix cases are for the street lights. Initially, we all thought this would be a simple fix. There are many examples of searchlights and spotlights in various night models found in the game. So we thought we would just add a light beam to the street light and call it a day. But we soon realized that just having light beams alone looked weird, as there was no visible light projection on the ground, and giving all the street lights light projection planes out of the question. Never mind the enormous workload, but it will be almost impossible to get it looking correctly because of the uneven terrain. So we experimented with a lot of different light beams based on other objects or just ideas that we've had. Eventually, we settled on this. It's big enough that you can see it is indeed lit, even from the default camera height, but also not too long as to make people wonder why it's not projecting light onto the ground. This design also looks good on most of the different streetlight variants, so transferring it from one to another is simple. It's not entirely realistic, especially when there are objects nearby with full light beams casting light on the ground, but this is the best we can do at the moment. Maybe if someone discovers how to do dynamic lighting in 0 hour, then maybe we can fix that properly. But for
This
now,
would not need dynamic lighting.
what? Sorry?
This would not need dynamic lighting. I see exactly what you're trying to do, and I think we might be able to do it if we can get the renderer in, because we actually already managed this for Renegade long ago.
I see. That would be interesting to see. Yeah, and this is just to show the edited street lamps in game. As you can see, it really gives life to otherwise lifeless map in 0 hour, especially at night. Well, only at night. It's a street lamp. So yeah. Another interesting case study is the China posters. It all started when we were trying to improve the quality of the posters for the propaganda center. Well, we were trying to improve the propaganda center texture. Yeah. So some posters were simple to find and fix because some of them are famous. Others were a lot harder, like the one on the right. It was difficult to find, but eventually we found the translation online, and we were able to recreate it. Apparently, it is from a common sign in China that roughly translate to "Beware of shoe stealers." Another thing to note in the picture on the right, there are two versions. We basically ignored the second version because on closer inspection it is the same as the first one, except the characters are all switched around and rotated. I guess whoever made that never expected anyone to try to read it in the first place. So yeah, that's the sign that we found. Beware of shoe thieves. So it is now canon that GLA workers' shoes are actually stolen from China. I guess that's another reason for the war.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, some signs were just a matter of finding the translation and recreating. Others had to dig a bit deeper, like this. I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but it's a restricted area sign that was mistakenly translated to Japanese instead of Chinese. That's why we couldn't find the proper meaning. The last sign is just a standard bicycle parking sign, it seems. So this is what it looks like currently, and well, not currently. In the in our internal dev, this is what it looks like. This hasn't been released yet, but as you can see, the signs are much clearer, and a lot of them look a lot nicer now. Of course, in game, you'll probably barely notice any of this, but I feel like even if you don't really notice it, you will still notice it in a way. It will feel better. That's what we think anyway. Here are some other Chinese posters, all now readable and spelled correctly as far as we can tell anyway. And yeah, most players will never notice these fixes, aside from maybe that one rare Chinese-speaking streamer zooming into the models out of curiosity. But yeah, most of the time people probably won't notice this. For those curious, the sign in the airfield, the long black one, reads Air Force Officer Academy. The one behind the barracks and on top of the gong in the command center is a famous Mao quote, a shortened version of famous Mao quote, which translates to, "If others don't hurt me, I won't hurt others." In hindsight, kind of funny, based on what happened in the China campaign. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read my notes, but the font is small. The I guess the smaller red poster with the 4 characters, we were never able to really translate it. The best we could find was that it was either an old idiom or it was just 4 separate characters that don't really mean anything together. And finally, the slightly longer red poster is the same Mao quote from the one above the gong, at least for the top. The top part is the same shortened version, and the bottom part is the extended version that we decided to add because in the original texture, the bottom half is basically indecipherable. It was just a bunch of pixels that we couldn't understand. We decided to translate it into an edited version of the longer version of the Mao quote. I didn't put the translation here, but I think you can read it from the Discord, the Discord screenshot. If you don't attack me, I won't attack you. If you attack me, I will give you 3 pointers. Be courteous. If you attack me again, I will return the favor. If you still attack me, I will root you out. If you attack me, I will counterattack. Basically, fuck around and find out. So all over the Chinese buildings, you have fuck around and find out pasted all over them. And that's exactly what happened to the GLA in the campaign, which is poetic. So here's another case study of with fixing the signs. In the case of the I think this is the nightclub and the Asian mall. Some of the signs were flipped, so it was just the matter of flipping them back. I'm not sure if they were flipped because the artist didn't know any better, or they were flipped for a copyright reason. I guess we'll find out eventually. Because in the case of the Asian mall, the red sign at the top is an actual brand. Apparently, we managed to find it on Google. There it is, and This is a picture of all of the Asian Mall and all of the possible condition states, from day to night, snow night, all the damaged conditions, and also all the garrison conditions, for a total of 32 unique models per structure. So if we go back to if we briefly go back to here, each of those, imagine 32 models for each of those things. And you kind of get a sense of the scale of these fixes. Okay, back here. This is another case study. This time it's for this train station model. This is a more substantial example of UV fixes that we've done to some models. This is one of those cases where the zero-hour dev seemingly updated some textures, some texture variants for a model, but not all of them. As you can see, in the normal day model, the back part of the sign is like missing a texture. And then if you check the damaged model, you can see why that is. It seems like in an older version of the texture, both sides of the sign were added separately, but then the texture was updated, but the UV maps weren't. And so you have this error. And also, this error, and also it ended up making the day model look significantly worse than the other variants. It's hard to say exactly why this is, and exactly which version is the updated version and which one is the old one. But for N Project Mod, we decided to go with a simple majority rule. And since it seems like all the other textures use the same format as this damaged version, we decided to update the default one. So this is how it looks like in 0-hour. This is how it looks like in Project Mod. And this is how it looks like in a map. As you can see, perhaps the roof looks less. The details in the roof are less visible. However, the model generally looks a lot better, especially at night, now that the weird night lights make sense, because in the previous, the holes at the bottom were removed. So yeah. For the N Project Mod project, we believe in comprehensive testing, viewing a model and a texture together, and then immediately testing in-game to see how it looks, to check if the details are too much or too little compared to everything else. Because if you just examine it one asset at a time, you might get tunnel vision, you might focus on things that will not really affect much, and make poor decisions based on a wrong premise. So yeah. I'll finish off this section by taking a look at some of my favorite NPM civilian asset comparison picks, because this one kind of just uh, brushed past them quickly last time. So this is the all the stadium assets together, showing off not only the new night lights that we added, but also showing off an example of the fixed geometry settings. You can compare the 0 hour version and the NPM version. The NPM version is very flush to the model, as opposed to the one in 0 hour. Yeah. Also, all of these stadium pieces are now garrisonable in NPM. I mean, yeah. Just for the sake of completeness. Another comparison image shows night versions added to these Chinese assets. The changes are very subtle, basically glowing lanterns and some lights, but as you can see, in the right conditions, they can look very, very nice, very atmospheric. Here we have a good example of what MP was talking about earlier with the smoothing fixes. As you can see, the one in 0 hour seems to be there. Something happened to the smoothing of the model. It became too smooth. It almost kind of looks like an inflatable instead of a castle. The end project mod version not only looks more solid, but you can also appreciate smaller details like the small windows on top of the roofs. Now, some parts of it might have become too angular, so maybe we may revisit this in another time. But in my opinion, it looks a lot better than the 0 hour version. This is more examples of fixed smoothing, this time in a snow map. As you can see, the houses here, the walls appear straight, whereas here they look a bit lumpy. Some of the buildings also look much brighter now. And yeah, also snow variants for the supply docks and the bus stop. And here is an example of the newly added night lights for a lot of the Asian buildings. Looking at this comparison really shows how dark the default game is at night sometimes. Almost like how most of Asia forgot to pay their electric bill. Though to be fair, China did lose a significant amount of infrastructure during the campaign, so maybe that's why. Anyway, so I will pause again for another question break before moving on to the next part. I'm just checking the chat at the moment to see questions that I may have missed. Okay, seems like there are no further questions, so we'll just move on for now. Okay, finally we reach this part. I would like to begin by disclaimer. These are concerns. I am not. These are concerns. These are not necessarily facts. I'm not saying that this is how things are. However, this is how things feel to me at the moment, which makes me worried. Also, I would like to preface by saying I am saying these things in the nicest way that I can. I'm not trying to shit on anyone or hate on anything in particular. If it sounds like I do, it is by accident. That is not my intention. But while I have you all here, I feel like I should at least share some of my concerns with the community patch. Ugh. Are you guys still here? Feels like you've been really quiet.
Yeah, we're listening.
Yep, yep.
I think everyone's just listening.
Everyone's listening. Everyone wants to see.
Okay. So, the top of the list, Zezon and Super Patch above all. There seems to be a lot of bias towards Zezon and Super Patch. Me and N5 were actually once part of Super Patch, but we left due to creative differences. So we don't really feel comfortable seemingly having to work for Super Patch again. We had hope that with the community patch that things would be looked at again from zero, comparing works from multiple 0-hour enhancement projects, not just Super Patch. So we're slightly disappointed that it seems like this isn't the case. Next, needing a license or giving up all of rights. This is mostly to do with the assets. Modders do things very casually. We rely on a simple permission system where we just ask each other for each other's stuff. We also use this permission system to protect our work from bad actors. Art assets take a long time and much effort to make. It's not an exaggeration that we treat them like our own children and are very protective of them. For an artist, having to give up his main file, such as a PSD file or whatever, brings many negative connotations. It's usually a sign that their client is planning to cut them out, replace them with a less demanding artist, or more recently, replace them with AI. At the moment, it feels like Super Patch, and by extension, the community patch, is trying to do exactly that by using ModLoader and possibly other tools to make it so that anyone can just edit any of the art assets at any time without needing the artist's consent or even their ability. While I can see how that might make things more efficient, there is a risk of design inconsistency as it changes hands between multiple users, and all the underlying design concepts will be broken, becoming chaotic and incoherent. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm sure some of you have experienced playing a game, watching a movie, or maybe even looking at a piece of art, and for whatever reason, it just feels off. It feels weird. However, when you try to scrutinize the work, check the details, you find nothing wrong. Nothing seems to be out of place, yet things still feel off. Design is a language. Even if you do not understand art, even if you don't understand design, people still feel it, and people still feel if something is off. So you cannot just brute force art. You cannot just brute force design, saying na, oh, we'll just make this as high quality, as high detailed as possible, fixing every pixel. It won't work like that. You might end up with something that looks really nice, but it will still feel off. Now, I understand that there are aspects of this that has to do with legal reasons, and I agree to abiding by those rules. However, I don't see the need for mod loader or needing to abide by super patch standards. I don't consider those as part of legal compliance. Some of you may think this is silly and would rather that we just stop bringing this up and comply. However, in every small niche community, like the zero-hour modding community, unique cultures develop and take hold over time. Now you are free to reject these cultures or even think that they're stupid. But without respect for culture, there can be no diplomacy. We can't be the only one adjusting to everything. At the very least, I suggest we get a proper art director who's an actual artist or designer to decide the best way to handle art assets and not just have Zezan decide everything. I nominate myself for this job, although we can also elect someone else. But yeah. I nominate myself since we've been put in charge of handling all the art, the texture fixes, and the art asset fixes anyway. So there is that. I'm losing my voice. But anyway. So no voice for the voiceless. I mean this in both a literal and a figurative means. In the literal sense, it is that it seems like if you're not in voice chat during meetings, you'll just basically be ignored, as nobody really checks the chat that much. In a more figurative sense, it seems like people who know GitHub or are good at GitHub or just talk more in general in the Discord, either in Discord or in GitHub, get ahead of everyone else, and everyone who doesn't will just get drowned out. And since there aren't really any officers in charge, except maybe Leggy, there's no way for these voiceless members to get their points across to the right people. We don't even know who the right people are supposed to be in most cases, except maybe Leggy, but we can't just keep bugging Leggy for everything. As someone who moderates several Discord servers, I understand that this can be very stressful. At the moment, it is kinda depressing that words get thrown around like this patch is for the whole community, but in reality, it seems like this patch is only for some. Especially people who have no problem talking, sharing their opinions freely. And everyone else just has to get good. Next, we go to lack of organization. At the moment, the server is very chaotic. People are just doing whatever, starting their own sub-projects, sharing their own standards to whoever will listen. From my experience, setting up the basic plan and assigning officers in charge of different parts of the project is done on day one. I understand the desire for free idea generation without any limits, as Zezan, Leggy, and others have explained to me in the past. However, I still feel like things are a bit too free and chaotic at the moment. And I feel like there is risk of people not wanting or being too lazy to switch gears later on when we finally decide on boundaries and organizational structure later. Finally, there seems to be a lack of urgency. While it is true that we don't have a deadline, that is not exactly correct either. Worker motivation has a limit. Fan anticipation and interest in the project has a limit. In a few months, in a few years, are all the people here gonna be as motivated as we are now? Will our commitment to quality be the same? Will people outside still care about this project and wait for us? Or will they just move on to other things? Perhaps some of you are committed to working on this project for all time, but I'm not. I have been doing this for a long time, and I'm tired. I feel like, at least with regards to just a fixed version of 0 Hour, over the years, modders have basically finished the work and done all that is needed. However, that is my opinion, and I know that we still need a proper review for this, but yeah, you can brush me off, you can call me paranoid or controlling if you want, but I have lived long enough to see many different mod and game projects rise and fall, and I can't help seeing all the red flags and hearing all the same warning buzzers that I've seen then and just not say anything. I do hope there is at least one person at the top who is considering all these things. Most people don't need a quadruple A experience. Most people will be happy with just a very polished double A offering. So now we're at our final, probably the most important questions break. I'm not sure if I was able to express myself properly then. I was squirming a lot, so maybe the audio wasn't good. So yeah, I will pause here for a bit.
Maybe I can say something about organization. I do agree that it does seem to be unorganized. And yes, no urgency. So what we see right now is like for example, in the code department, we see many developers like achieving the same goals and everyone building in different repositories, testing out different strategies and different things. Is it bad? I don't know. I think at the end there's still value because everyone can cherry pick the best pieces from everyone else. So like no effort is lost. So for example, Justin Marshall is pushing with like rendering fixes and improvements, and when we feel like there's some good stuff, then we can look at this and then we can pick it and use it. But that doesn't mean he necessarily contributes to us, right? And so what the licensing of the official EA source code allows us to do is this kind of cherry picking, that we can take the best pieces and combine it to the best works. Because at the end, the goal is to make 0 Hour the best game we can, right? And so the situation in the past has always been that there are many different projects building up to achieve like a great state for 0 Hour and branch out into different directions with new units and maps and missions, right? But there never was a project that strived to like become a foundation for like everyone to build upon. So there was a mention of End Project Lite, and I do agree that the End Project does a lot of fantastic things, like a lot of amazing fixes, polishing on all these assets and textures and any scripts. So there's great value. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think End Project sits somewhere between a patch and a mod, right? So it's like in between somewhere, right? And yeah, it will be interesting to see how we can like work together. And yeah, how to organize it. I think that needs people to step up and take ownership of things. Yeah, and try to figure out the best plans to make things happen.
And the license part, by the way, like you stated that you're giving it away, but in a way not quite, because that's sort of what the license is for, right? If you, there are a lot of different licenses out there. Maybe the solution is to find a license that works for modders, and maybe in the context of community patch. I know with code and on GitHub you can specify code owners. Maybe that's also something we can look at for assets. So if somebody wants to change a specific asset, then the person who is marked as owner of that asset needs to approve the PR, right? That's maybe something we can look at.
Okay. Admittedly, I don't know much about GitHub and the process. So I admit that a lot of this is probably ignorance, or maybe just impatience or fear. But yeah, I am open to discussing things. We are open to discussing things.
So
It's just that
let's say you release End Project Lite, right? With the licensing that you currently have, that no one can actually build upon the work that you do. How do you envision that this would then work as a foundation for someone to build upon?
it's not that nobody can take it and continue. It's just that if they do, they have to give credit. That's about the only condition.
But
The bad actors that I mentioned are people who just take things, they scrub all the references to the original work, and they just claim it as their own work. I made this. And when the original owners find out and they comment in their YouTube channels, comment in their ModDB page, they either get mad or they delete the comments entirely. When you're faced with people like that, what can you do? Maybe the first time you think to yourself, nah, this is just a mistake. It's just one bad person. And then second time, third time, fourth time becomes...
But that's where a license can come in to protect you, right? Because you can have an open license that forces people to like give attribution, so that if they use it in their work, they have to give you credit. Basically, there are licenses that that can account for this. This is why I said maybe we need to go searching for a license that works for the modders.
Okay.
I think many years ago I had a similar mindset that I thought, it would be good to be recognized for the work I put, right? But over time, I lost this aspiration because the only thing that matters in the end is that the players do appreciate the work and enjoy the work, no matter how it came to be that they use it, but they just enjoy it. So, for example, the Control Bar Pro, we released it under the MIT license, so everyone was able to edit it as they pleased. And there were versions released with all credits removed from FIS and myself, and that was fine. Then there would still be an audience, and people download it with changed looks, and yeah, it's fine as long as players enjoy the work, however it was mutated over time.
Is this really a hill worth dying over? These people are contributing their time. They're not free interns, and not even asking for much. It's just a simple title and like something in the credits, and having their work not being removed. They shouldn't add watermarks to their textures. That shouldn't be a thing that should be added. And we should also allow their contributions to help us. Yeah, like this is. I'm sure if it works fine for you, Zenon, that's great. But nobody wants to be a free, internship. Not everybody wants to do that. If that's your thing, sure, man. Whatever floats your boat.
I mean,
but this doesn't seem that unreasonable.
I would just like to quickly interject and reply to Zezon's reply. I understand what you're saying, and for the most part, I feel the same way. I don't really care that much about credit anymore. The thing is, though, the people who play these derivative works come to our server, and then they ask about, where is this version of the mod? Why aren't you uploading this version of the mod? I watched it. I watched this in some video. It keeps coming back to us. As much as we want to forget it, it keeps coming back. Like a bad dream. So I understand what you're saying. And I also agree that I just want to stop caring about this. But it keeps coming back. That's the issue.
I mean, the other thing about credit, which is nice about GitHub, is every file you add, every piece of work you've done gets logged, right? So,
yeah,
like history of the file will forever be there, even after you die, and like 100 years from now, somebody can look on GitHub and say, "Oh, this is where the file began. This person," right? So from that perspective, it's also credit, right? That's also another way to look at it.
Arctic, Leggy, next meeting.
Yeah, I'll be there soon.
Okay.
Yeah, when it comes to credit, of course, when we do the community patch, we'll of course say credits and say who's involved and who isn't, whatever. But credit per individual file, yeah, what Arctic says is basically one thing with GitHub. Regarding what Bruce said about, free interns, whatever, we're all working for free, everyone. So, yes, I understand credit is nice and important and things like that. But like, are you implying we should credit each individual file somewhere somehow, or like
Everybody
your...
should be credited properly. I'm just saying that everybody involved in this project, from you to me to anybody who's actually contributing to the project, should have their name credited for their things they've contributed. It's that simple. I don't need to put specifics.
Yeah, I think
because everybody
Arctic
here wants to get
explained
0
it
hour.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Arctic already explained that something like that can be done. So again, I understand that a lot of this is probably ignorance. And I apologize if this is like uh, the wrong way to bring up these kinds of issues.
No, it's good. It's good. It's always good to discuss these things and have clarity. One thing though, regarding the PSD files, for example, I think that's maybe something worth discussing. You said that you'd rather not have those be uploaded, right? You just would like to upload the final. Yeah, but at the same time, there is a problem because you also mentioned that you might say that you will stop contributing over time. You know, life happens, things happen. So if, let's say, there is still an error that would need to be fixed, then we wouldn't have the PSD file. Right?
Well, that's partly because I feel like eventually there is going to be an end to the work, at least with regards to the art. I feel like there is a finish line where basically the art assets won't need any more changes.
Yeah, but
So
I mean,
I'm coming at it from
we'll
that line
probably
of thinking.
we'll probably over time look into maybe upscaling, or maybe something happens where we can use automated 3D rendering creations and this and that, and potentially having access to a PSD could help with that in the future. I'm just saying potentially here, you know, just trying to get your feeling on it. So I think that is possibly one of the reasons why a PSD would be more sought after. But yeah, I don't know how the others feel about this.
A small suggestion, but we're talking about having an art director at some point, right? That was
Mhm.
mentioned. Why not people who are
It's
just
a
moving on?
suggestion.
Oh yeah, like if we do have that, we could have like an archive, and the art director would be or directors, if you want to put it, would be the sole, like, you know, people who have access to it, and people who are moving on can add their PSTs because, you know, they're done, and, you know, yeah, they could just give it to the team when that time comes. Like, I guess
Yeah.
some people want to move on,
Yeah.
and
The thing
until they want
is,
to move on, they could just keep it.
the thing is,
What you're saying is
get
we
what
have a
Leggy is. I get what Leggy is saying. It's not like you can plan when you're gonna die or something like that. When that happens and the main file is never successfully backed up or something like that, then it's just gone. And the work will have to restart again from scratch.
Well, N5
I
is
do get that.
N5 is mentioning standardization, but I don't think standardization is really necessary for how the file is created, as long as the look remains, like the end product remains like it belongs, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
A
art
bit.
directors would be a good suggestion, I think. And personally, I would say we should have more than one, because if we have one person deciding everything, that probably isn't the best either. I don't know how the others feel about that.
Hey, if I may intersect, I'm the hunter. I'm the main lead of Rise of the Reds and Shockwave. You might have heard of them. When it comes to art direction, which is something I do and have done for both of these projects, I am the one guy who determines everything when it comes to art direction, but I am still obviously open to feedback from other artists. It's why I do things.
Yeah. I also think that there should only be one director. Now, I understand the fear of, what do you call this? If, you know, power. How? Sorry, I'm beginning to lose words, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. I know the apprehensions of having only one. The issue, however, I feel like there is more issues when there are multiple directors. This is something that I've personally experienced working on different mod projects. Uh, in and also something that I've seen happen to other projects, like there was a recent thing that happened with the Renegade X game where the person in charge of their server or something, they had a fight with the team, and so he basically held the access to their server as hostage, as blackmail, to as revenge for having hang on, having him kicked out of the team. So stuff like that can happen in projects where where you have multiple people of equal power. There there needs to be a sort of hierarchy, even if there's only a single director. He is still going to be accountable to everyone's opinion, and if he is not, then he would be booted out. I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly.
Yeah, no, I understand your point.
But yeah, I have many bad experiences of multiple admins. I understand multiple moderators because moderator is a difficult job, but multiple admins is a nightmare to deal with. But yeah, sorry.
Well, I think it's something that we can look into as well on how to approach this. I do think an art director is a nice sort of role to have for someone to verify that ultimately things have the same look and feel. But yeah, there comes the problem though when it comes to power. So one person calling the shots. I understand that, like what the hunter was saying, that yes, you know, this person will be listening to feedback and things like that. But yeah.
I'd like to briefly answer this question from DoomX. Why should one person have exclusive access to assets? Again, it's not exclusive access. It is just a matter of respect.
It's
But
also
yeah.
just the art director is not the person who basically holds all the other artists, for lack of a better description, hostage, so to say. It's just that you streamline a process, because I've worked with multiple artists. I am one myself. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Like if you're the
Yes.
lead artist, it gets to the point that it's basically almost like a signature. Like I can look at the texture from either of the mods that I've worked on, and I can just, from the style itself, I can tell, oh, this was made by someone called Ingram. This one was made by Comrade. Oh, this one is my own, because I can recognize that style, obviously, because I made it myself. But it's mainly just to streamline things, to make sure that everything looks like it belongs together, or that it's coherent, and it's not just like, you know, one thing put next to another thing looks completely different. This is something I put a lot of emphasis on when I'm making new art assets or making new things for the game, because everything in 0 Hour and Shockwave looks like it's originally supposed to belong there. That it's because I was very strict on the art direction to make sure that it all stays in line and looks like it could be something from the original game.
Yeah. This is especially important for art direction because art is very subjective. You could look at this, you could look at it this way. It's much easier to get mad at a single person, a single difficult person, than a group of difficult people. And artists are going to be some of the most difficult people that you will ever work with. I can say this as an artist myself. You've heard of the rule of Yeah, you've heard of the rule of 2 for the Sith. For artists, it's the rule of 1. There can
It's,
only be one.
I can confirm I've had many heated debates with other artists before in the past, and probably will in the future. But we always come to consensus eventually.
Yeah.
Well,
It's just
there's
that
also
that eventually is gonna take a very long time, and
there's
with
also
many hurt feelings.
the problem is that if we're dealing with art situations here, we're trying to keep the art style of the game, though. So what you're saying regarding art signatures, indirectly, hopefully, that won't be noticed in game, and people will say, "Wow, this looks and feels like it's literally what EA shipped to us, just better quality or with less bugs."
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that like that style is it's super obvious, but it's still like, someone would leave a certain signature in the sense, not as an literal signature, but you can recognize the styles as you work with them. This is not just in video games and with art. I've also seen this in professional work, like me being an electrician. When I had to do quality assurance for some of my colleagues, I could literally tell who made a certain cabinet because of the way they do the wiring. This is no different with textures and models and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll have a chat with Arctic, Setson, and Abishin, the other guys, about something like this, whether it's a good idea. Personally, I think, yeah, we could go for this. But unfortunately, I do have to hop off and join another meeting. So I'll be going. I can catch up with you, Zeke, afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I understand that I kind of blindsided you with this, and I do apologize.
No problem. I just didn't expect it to take this long. I mean, but a lot had to be said, so obviously it tends to take longer. But yeah, so I'll be off. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay, there's a question here by DoomX. You have said that at one point that art has an ending. Hypothetically, like Leggy said, what if in the future we could use an asset? What if that one person could hold stuff hostage? I may be missing the point. I don't want to come off as disrespectful. What if someone is willing to contribute stuff that can't be taken hostage? I don't understand the last part, but again, this is not about holding files hostage. It is just about proper credit for the most part. And again, Arctic has already explained that something like that is possible. So in the future, we would just look into that. But yeah, art does have an end, or I guess it would be better to say it this way: art needs to have an end, because art is subjective. There is no best way to do art. Even when you feel like you've reached the point where you have created the best work of art ever, give it some time. Once you look at it again, you'll hate the whole thing.
I can
So
confirm.
it's not so much that art has an ending. It's more of you need to put a stop to it before it consumes you.
I can confirm this to be true when I look at work from that I made like 5 or even 10 years ago, because God, I'm getting old. Yeah, sometimes you look at it and just like, cringe.
I think this is true for any works. When we write code and
Absolutely.
we look back at the code in 5 years, we also think, what the hell did we do there? Let's fix that. Let's optimize that. I think what we strive for is reaching a state where we are happy with an improvement, right? And then we sign that off, and then it goes to the customer. But that doesn't mean that there can't be another improvement in the future, right? There's always
Yes.
something else that could be improved. But as long as we are happy over time with everything we add, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yes, my argument is this particular argument is specifically for multiple art directors. I think multiple art directors is a very bad idea because things can get very confusing and very messy very fast.
In regards of the texture restoration, sorry that I cut you off there. In regards to texture restoration, my impression is that a majority of the restoration is factual. So there's no deviance. There's no like decision you make. It's just like factual. You copy parts from one part of the texture to the other one to fix the discrepancies, right? But then there is an element of more freedom where you say, okay, how do I do this? All the snow textures, they are lower resolution than the summer ones. How do I deal with this, right? And then you go like you need different techniques to get to like a better product. And then you start like, okay, how can I implement this the best way? And there is more creative decision making involved. But there is so one part is definite factual, other part is more you have to figure out things.
Yeah. Hello? Did I get cut off?
No, we can still hear you.
It seems like Zezon just suddenly stopped to me.
I don't know. I think they finished what they were saying.
Yeah, I just stopped talking.
Okay.
Okay.
I was worried there for a moment. But yeah, with regards to fixes, a lot of it is factual. Basically, just following procedure, making sure everything is up to spec. However, there's also an aspect where, in times where stuff is missing, or you can't get them all to spec exactly, then you'll just have to make do with a tricky solution, even if it's not necessarily the best one.
I found that for texture restoration, it's typically possible to always get like a good solution, even for textures that are missing or textures that are awfully low res. You can assemble it in a way. There's always some piece from some other texture variant that you can borrow to make it happen. But sometimes it really takes a long time. So sometimes you sit 30, 40 hours on one set to get it all right. And even then, if you re-review it, you probably find more errors. So yeah, at some point you say, okay, it's good enough. But yeah, it is a lot of work, but it is possible to polish this all nicely.
Yeah, it is possible. We just have to be careful not to basically get stuck trying to find the best solution, because there are times where it's just not going to happen. At least not without completely recreating the texture, but we want to avoid that as much as possible. Okay, I'm just reading the chat at the moment.
So if you were working at a games company, then you would also check in your 3D and 2D source files into the repository. They wouldn't lay around at the developer's machine. Everything gets pushed to the central repository, and then eventually there will be people working upon the work of others. So if someone leaves the company and a new hire comes in, he may need to retouch a texture. So I don't think it's a good strategy to just have like owners that keep all their files private, because what happens if there's data loss, right? Like the computer explodes, or the person has an accident, or the person doesn't want to work on it anymore, right? So if everything is shared, then the record is there for everyone to use. And for the game itself and for the long-term goal of the project, that's the best case. Is it the best case for the single artist who works on something? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the project itself, that's a greater goal in the end.
Yeah, I understand that. And again, as Arctic has explained, there does seem to be a way to please both sides. So it's just a matter of figuring out the details of that, I guess. That said, there is, we are comparing like a free project to a company. I think in a company it is more expected that workers will drop out because of probably overwork or lack of pay, whereas for a free project more people are expected to stay on. But I do get what you're saying, and I am willing to bridge the gap and find a solution that works for both sides.
What also sharing all assets also allows to do is delegate work to more people to work on the same kind of things and improve on their own work. So for example, that's what I've done right now. I've pushed all the PSD files there so anyone can pick it up and continue, or cherry pick things out of it, right? Whatever, right? And so that I can now work on code things while someone else can pick up on this, right? So, and I think that's ideal. Then I don't have to keep ownership over something, right? And that is for everyone.
As I said, the issue is credit. Artists would be willing to part with their files if proper credit can be assured.
My expectation is that once a product is released, then of course the contributors will be listed with the release. I mean, we haven't released a patch yet, so there was no such event, but typically that is always the case. I wouldn't know why it would be any different in this case.
I guess it's just the details that need to be worked out.
What do you mean by artists are okay with parting with their files? I mean, if you're putting the files in the repository, they're still there for you to work on, right?
Yeah. That's about it.
But it switches from being like somebody's own artwork and their own piece into being basically something like freeware where everybody can, pull it from the repository and add their own spin to it. Right?
As long as no one can just randomly come in and say, I did this, then it's fine. And from what I understood, it is possible to do that. That even if the file is added to the repository and someone takes it and tries to claim it for themselves, they can't, because you can prove it through the history in GitHub.
Yeah, but this can be done with all kinds of works, right? So, I mean, how can someone stop this? If someone wants to be an asshole and do this, and it will always happen. But I think at the end of the day, the community as a whole will know who the authors are of the original works. Maybe not like the individual noobs that come in and see it for the first time. Maybe they don't. But overall consensus will be that like when the streamers present the works and show the credits and so on, like word will spread and people will know who worked on sort of things, right?
Yeah, but giving the PSCs are basically giving the source code. So once you give it, there's no ungiving it. Just to tell people here. So asking for proper accreditation and protection is the reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, Tria says you can't control what happens. We are not God. That is true. But you can still do all that you can do.
When there's nothing stopping somebody from recording a song and then singing on top of it and then trying to re-release it. I mean, you don't have to have the source files to do that with music. You don't have to have the source files to do it with art or code. You can always do that, but people will know. And there's the comment history, of course, in the repository that shows not only who contributed what, but when they did it and at what level. And then you can, if you have the art director, like you can control who is able to merge into a branch. That way you've got the control that you're looking for too. So it covers the control, it covers the credit, and I mean, I think the benefits of having it in the repository are obvious in terms of data loss from the computer blowing up, or personal loss from getting hit by a bus, or quitting, or if somebody gets you guys were talking about stuff being taken hostage. I feel like that's kind of not the level that the people here are working at, but if there were somebody here that needed to leave, we would still be able to continue the project. A lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
anybody left, somebody else could continue their work or just recreate it after all, right? Like the art direction is already in the art direction. The look of things is already predetermined by the base game. Like nothing will be exclusive.
Recreating is a bit hard because you start from scratch, and like let's say the texture set to polish it takes 30 hours. That means that the new person needs to first spend those 30 hours to get to a similar baseline to then add additional fixes on top. So it's not really efficient, right? If you just like have the work public, everyone can iterate on it. And the advantage I see on having it public also is that it invites more people to come along and improve on the status quo further, right? So like someone can make a fork of our project and they can make another pass on our work and they can improve it even further. And then we can go ahead and pick their improvements and get them back into our project, right? So you have an evolvement of improvements, right? Because it changes hands and keeps on improving. And if we like improvements that happen elsewhere, we can always go and cherry pick those. The same will happen with the code. Someone else in another repository makes some great additions to the code. We look at it, we cherry pick it, integrate it, and then we can benefit from the same developments. And I think that's the best case because you keep on improving the game, right? Continuously, because many people contribute to the same goal for improving the game, and I think that stands above everything else.
Yes. Well, anyway, I think I want to end the meeting there because there seems to be something happening in the chat. And I feel sorry for N5 who is recording this meeting. So I think I'll just end it right here. If it's okay with you guys. I don't want the recording to be too big, and also it seems like the same points are just being repeated over and over again now. So I think this is a good place to end. So thank you for coming, and we'll see each other in the next meeting, I guess.
Sounds good to me.
Oh,
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation.
okay.
Yeah, this was fun, guys. And if I don't get everything much here, this was a great presentation. Glad to be a part of it.
I just have one question.
Yes.
I think, first of all, I wasn't in the like at the beginning of the meeting since I wasn't home. But the thing is, you're talking about how you want credit and whatnot, but isn't the main goal of all the artists is to preserve the original art? I mean, you're not really creating a new art. You're gonna be enhancing the vanilla art and to keep it preserved, right?
That is debatable because restoration is its own thing. It's an entire process in art. Whether or not the goal is just to maintain the original work, it depends. Because if you're planning on upscaling the textures, as Zezan said in the last meeting, you do need to improve the textures up to a certain level where it will not create the AI upscale will not create too much junk from the source.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Andy actually
So
makes a
it
very
will,
good point in the chat here that any sort of art contributed to this project should probably be created new for this project and not something that you take out of a previous project that you had worked on prior, because shit gets complicated in that case.
I mean, you can't really use like you're basically gonna use your skills to enhance or upscale or whatnot the original work. Like you're not if you're
Yeah.
gonna contribute completely different new things, then that's become a mod. It's no longer like open sourcing the project. It's gonna be separate. That's what I mean. Also, I don't think there should be a director. A coordinator is a better role. And since we have a lot of people who are highly skilled in their work, I believe like it should be probably like rotated between the people. And like who will
the coordinator. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. The coordinator you're talking about is what I have in mind for the art director. I realize that a lot of people have a negative image of the word director, but a director is basically just the point guy. He sets the boundaries and he makes sure that everyone else is working. Otherwise, he doesn't tell them what to do. He just gives the jobs and reports back to Leggy or whoever.
Okay.
So yeah, more of a coordinator, basically.
Yeah.
The point is to avoid a situation where you have multiple artists believing that they are the guy. I've been in that situation before and it's not pleasant.
Yeah, true. I can.
So yeah,
honestly, I'm gonna. I think the thing how this will work. Like I guess the people who are gonna work with art should probably like define what they want to work with, and yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I will end the meeting here. I will have to go back and check the comments later in case I missed anything. But yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Yes.
And
Also,
good night.
sorry, just one last point about the PST and the images. I think the PSTs are kind of a better thing to go with, because if we like take it with the code perspective, when you share the image, you're just sharing the binary, and like let's say you're working with the code and you get a binary, you can't really do anything with it. But if there is a PSD, there's like a basis to work with, you can kind of work with it, you know.
Yeah, but
That's the only like my point in this. But I also agree in your point, like eventually the decision goes to the author if he wants to share his work or whatnot.
yeah, I get what you're saying. However, there is an issue that I feel like is being overlooked, and that is, I feel like everyone will have a different version of Photoshop, and I have this worry that if we are giving PSD files and someone's PSD file is from the latest Photoshop, and the artist that it goes to is someone who has an older PSD, then it won't work anyway. This is one of the reasons why. Yes?
I have to. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but on Photoshop, there is an option for compatibility mode with all versions of Photoshop.
Yes, but that direction is that's from newer Photoshop opening older files and not the other way around. If you try to open a newer version file using an older version, you'll get an error. Now there is limited compatibility, but it's limited. It won't always work. This is why the practice of just sending the final exported file was put in place, because no one can guarantee that everyone's Photoshop files will be compatible with each other.
Honestly, you should just do both. Like have the Photoshop file, an export of the uncompressed texture, and yeah, then you can work from there.
Yeah, there's also that.
I disagree with that. Simply because Photoshop already has this feature inbuilt, which is called something optimize something. And then the composite of the texture is already baked into the PSD file, and that's the way to go.
I mean, I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I've had experiences in the past at work where I couldn't open someone else's file, or someone else couldn't open my file, and that was a big headache. And so we just resolved to sometimes we've had to resolve to just sending the exported file and have the other person basically remake everything, which is a painful process depending on the work. So yeah. Anyway, I think I will end this meeting here. I don't know how many times I've said that already.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
been a wild ride for like what, 2-3 hours? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming. Good night, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Yep. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Take care, everyone.